CHAMSA for 3 years, and Mr. Mutsipe was also a president of CHAMSA at the time. And so I would not have been appointed to CHAMSA for another period of 3 years if there was a cloud hanging. And subsequent to that, I was appointed the CEO of the Association of SADC Chambers for 5 years, and later the president of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce for 5 years, which is all the chambers of commerce in Africa. So all those institutions make their investigations before they appoint you. And if there's a criminal record against you, there's no way you could hold a position of such high office.
Thank you. You can then start with 1.4 in your statement.
Can I just say a quick follow-up there? Just in terms of NAFCOC, I mean, they've had governance issues, it looks like.
Yes.
Do they still have that, and why? I mean, can they put together policies and governance structures and deal with this thing once and for all? I mean,
the problem there, you find NAFCOC has been infiltrated by people who are not in business and who use it for their own purposes. You find a lot of people that have no business, they have no substance, and the Chamber of Commerce has to be credible business people. And those people are many and have a loud voice. And they come there with completely different agendas, not to really benefit from the networks, the opportunities that NAFCOC sets up. One of the big things that we facilitated during our time, we negotiated set-asides for chambers of commerce and for SMEs and black business with all the government parastatals, Transnet, Eskom, Telkom, and they set billions of rands of set-asides. I remember Eskom at the time, their procurement spend was 18 billion. They said, Sipo, bring those SMEs, bring those black business. We can set aside. We signed MAU with Eskom, and they said 50% we'll set aside. Just bring us businesses that will be able to execute and do the jobs. We want to support black business, but we couldn't, because most of the people it was mine, were not geared to actually running businesses. They just wanted to put their hands on the till in NAFCOC rather than build sustainable businesses. And there were many opportunities that we negotiated. Virtually all the parastatals opened up to black business. And that's the environment that we had created.
Thank you. Thanks, you can.
If I proceed, Commissioner, on 1.4, this statement is being prepared and finished to the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of impropriety regarding the Public Investment Corporation, the PIC Commission. The purpose for this statement is to respond to the allegations relating to Sakumnoto that were made by Mr. Lawrence Mlaudzi of Kilimanjaro Capital, Pty Ltd, Kilicap, in a statement before the PIC Commission on or about 27 March 2019. This statement will also serve as a response to previous allegations leveled by the Sunday Times on 24 February 2019, and to allegations of the same nature which were expressed by General Bantu Olomisa in Parliament and in his open letters addressed to the President of the Republic of South Africa. This statement should not in any way be construed as Sakumnoto attacking any entity or a person. Sakumnoto has been duly invited by Advocate Lube SC to respond to allegations made by Mr. Mlaudzi in relation to Sakumnoto and myself at the PIC Commission. I trust this response is necessary to not only give Sakumnoto an opportunity to give its version of events, but also to clarify inaccuracies made by Mr. Mlaudzi. By way of background, Sakumnoto is a Pan-African investment holding company which was established in June 2000 and has been able in a short space of time to establish a reputable history. The company's vision is to be a leading, credible, and a trusted black economic empowerment company that adds value to all its shareholders, partners, employees, and the community. Sakumnoto plays an important and significant role in advancing black economic empowerment through the creation of sustainable and competitive group of companies. Sakumnoto has over the years identified and invested in different sectors of society, such as mining, coal and platinum, mining services and logistics, education, aviation, industrial pumps, media and communication, oil and gas, property and real estate, financial services, ICT, and other related services. The company has expanded its business to focus on strategic investments in financial services, mining, properties, and other sectors, and also expanded to do business in the continent.
Can I ask?
Yes.
In relation to all of these initiatives and different companies and investments, how many of these have had support, funding in any form from the PIC?
There were 4, and the other one lapsed. It was a call option which lapsed, the EcoBank. I will address it.
I understand, I can see it follows, but I just want, out of the 4, what is the total exposure of the PIC to your group of companies as things stand?
The total exposure, remember the investment that we've done with PIC, we're always consortium, and we would hold a portion of the shares, not all. For instance, in EcoBank, even though we were promoters, PIC requested us to ensure it's broad-based and said we must give away 65% of the shares to broad-based groups, so we remained with 30% in that one. So in the next one, we...
No, but in that sense, yes, that's what PIC is asking. Did PIC
Yes.
invest any money? Did it buy shares?
Yes, yeah, they invested money, they supported
so
us.
are those shares getting dividends and getting returns
Yes, yeah,
on
they are
those
dividends,
shares?
yeah, and we are servicing.
You're servicing every loan?
We're servicing the loans in the loan we are servicing. Remember, EcoBank fell away, that investment. So there's nothing to service because PIC took those shares away from us. The Northern is being serviced because they are pref shareholders, so that are getting paid every year. And PIC is one of those. That's the Zambezi. And the Total is paying very good dividends, and we are servicing that investment. The smaller investment on the property, which was a 500 or so million investment, we are servicing it, but not fully. And because of the market, and the rentals, when we renewed the rentals, all the landlords wanted lower rentals, but we'll make up in a short space of time. So those are the only investments.
But what I would like is the actual percentage of investment by the PIC into each of the entities and when that investment took place. I mean, the question here is what is the cumulative, individual and cumulative exposure of the PIC to the group of companies that you have set up? That's what I'm looking for.
Yes, we will work on that and present, because currently we have not worked it out.
No, that's fine,
Yeah.
because the question must be, what is the cumulative, I'm looking at an investment, what is the cumulative exposure, what is my risk?
Okay, so we'll
Right.
definitely do that.
Thank you.
And forward that to the advocate.
Thank you.
Just to follow up there, maybe, are you able to give us a global figure in terms of those 4 deals, the PIC funding on those deals, besides the shareholding, just the broad 100% of the funding? When
So
you
the
add-
consortium, not
Not your
us,
part
not
only,
us.
just,
Yeah,
you know, to say this deal was R1 billion, this one was another 2 billion rand or something like that.
The Zambezi was around 2 billion, and but there are many consortiums included there. We are a small portion, and then Zambezi Platinum.
What percentage is your stake in that 2 billion rand consortium? Can you remember?
We'll bring that
But if you
information.
can't, it's fine.
Yes,
Let's
yeah.
go to the next
And
one.
then
It's
the
fine.
next one,
Zambezi is a platinum,
Yeah, and then
it's 2 billion rand.
And then there's Total, which was 1.7 billion, but there were two consortiums, Kilicap and ourselves.
Yes, we know quite a lot about that one.
And then the property, which was 550 million.
Yeah, which is you guys, I think it's
Which
the
is
bulk
us,
of
yeah.
it is 100%.
That's 100% Sakumnoto, yes. Yeah.
Yes,
Those are the only ones. Remember, EcoBank fell off.
Yes, how big was the
EcoBank.
EcoBank, yeah?
EcoBank was $250 million.
Okay.
But PIC took 50% of that and held those shares directly for themselves through listed equities.
All right.
And warehoused the other 50% and created a call option for the BEE. That's the call option that lapsed, and they took those shares.
All right.
They're back at PIC.
And if you can answer, please do, but if you don't want to, it's fine. Could you, just to get a sense of the size of your group, I mean, can you give us the net asset value of Sakumnoto?
I'll have to check that for you, and I can forward it.
Guesses, do you want to answer it in terms of, say, it's roughly around this amount or something like that?
I would like to give
You don't want to answer
accurate,
that?
yes.
You want to think
Get
about
the right
that?
one.
Okay, all right.
I want to give you the right figure.
That's fine, that's fine.
Yes. Okay. Um, 2.3, as part of the Sakumnoto Group's commitment to broad-based economic empowerment, it has placed 10% of its equity into a trust to benefit schools, children's homes, and churches in previously disadvantaged community.
Can I ask you, is that the same trust as the Impilo Trust?
No.
What trust is this then? Is
This
this
is
a family trust?
No, this is Vulindlela Development Trust. It's not a family trust.
And who has set it up? That is the Sakumnoto Group that has set it up?
Yes, we set it up for schools, for NGOs, and for various churches as well, just to support.
So how much has it now got in the trust, and how much have you dispensed? What is the trust worth? How much have you put into the trust, and has it made any grants?
Yes, we've made some grants. I think what we remember that the trust disperses when it gets dividends. If the entities do not declare dividends, we can't disperse. The investments we hold, most of them are long-term investments, and first service the loan before you get dividends to yourself. It's only when you have dividends that you can then disperse to all your shareholders.
So what is the value in the trust at the moment?
The value of the trust would be 10% of the value.
No, but I'm saying that if you 10% of the value, yes, that's theoretical. Is there any cash that has been put into that you can dispense, or is it something that is waiting?
No, it's waiting.
And when was this trust established?
It was. I'll come back to that. I don't have that.
Okay, so again, if you say it is to benefit schools, homes, etc., do you have identified beneficiaries? Or
yes,
is
we have identified beneficiaries.
So perhaps it would be useful if you could give us the value of the trust, whether there's any, what you're waiting for in terms of, if there's no dispensation, is there any cash that has been there, or when would you expect some cash to flow or anticipate that, and who the beneficiaries are in the specific, if that could be provided as well, for the Vulindlela Trust.
We'll definitely do that.
Thank you.
Sakumnoto has issued a further 10% of its shares to the Global Fund for Christ, another broad-based empowerment trust, a mark for projects in education, healthcare, job creation, food security, and support of entrepreneurial development.
How does this trust relate to the one you referred to later, which is the Global Trust for Jesus, I think it is?
It's the same.
So it just changed names?
The name is,
And then similar to above, how much, is there any cash and any dispensing of benefits to entities, or is it something that is, as in 2.3 with the Vulindlela, waiting for things to flow?
This trust has been funded directly by Sakumnoto Group, and it's involved in many countries. So the funds that we've contributed has been first to launch the chapters of this trust across 82 nations in the past few years, so that we are able to raise more funds and disperse to more NGOs, in addition to what we contribute as a group, and in addition to what the trust gets through its investments.
Was the trust formed?
The trust was formed 9 years ago.
Sorry?
Around 8-9 years ago.
So about 2010, 2011?
Around there.
And is there any difference between the Global Fund for Christ and the Global Fund for Jesus?
It's the same thing.
There's no difference?
There's no difference.
And does it have its own bank account, distinct from Vulindlela? They each have their own bank account?
Yeah.
And would you be able to give us how much funding has been in that, or donated to that trust?
Yes, we can
from
be able to.
Sakamoto, and then
Yes.
what the disbursements have been, and to which entities?
Okay. So we can be able to give that.
Thanks.
Point 5, the company's mission is
Can
to...
I just, yeah, sorry, Mr. Seleko. So follow-up question on 2.3 and 2.4. Are you saying, especially the first trust, 2.3, that they never had any cash inflows or any dividends to fund their projects? Are you saying they've never received any cent to carry out their projects?
No, we have not distributed yet, because remember, you start by creating value in a business. So in other words, whatever little income you get, you reinvest to get more projects so that you can get scale. And it's the same thing that we've done to support the Global Fund for Jesus to expand its network so that it can then collect donations from all those nations and many people. So you create a lot of awareness first. You invest in creating scale so that you're able to mobilize more resources and be able to impact more beneficiaries. So similarly, we've been creating value, and in actual fact, it's not only this trust, even all the shareholders of Sakumnoto have not received dividends because we've been reinvesting. There's no selected shareholders that have received any dividends. So if the dividends we receive, all shareholders would benefit. None of the shareholders have been discriminated.
So this trust in 2.3, when was it formed?
At around the same time as the
2010.
Yeah.
Okay.
Global Fund for Jesus.
You know why I'm asking this, because you see the question is that we have a lot of BE trusts, and
Yes.
many are not getting any dividends for a decade or two, and they're supposed to fund projects for the poor and all that, you know, and it just becomes a problem, and they say they're not benefiting from BEE because they just don't see the benefit for a decade or 15 years and all that. I know there are trusts that have received money,
Yes.
you know, but there are many trusts which actually haven't.
That's a challenge of the broad-based groupings, because when you invest in business, it takes time to build scale, and it takes time. For instance, any transaction you do will take minimum 5 years for it to be paid up before you get dividends, because you first have to service the loan. And after you finish servicing the loan, and if there's value, you are able to then start getting dividends. But in most of these transactions, you find that after even finishing the 5 years, there's still no value. And if there is value, you've identified new transactions or new projects, and you must deploy that capital that you have to expand the business, to explore new opportunities, so that you get a diversification of income long term. So, and as business people, as entrepreneurs, we understand this, that you have to be patient. You can take 10 years before you see real value from your investments. But you're right, communities don't understand that. They want to benefit now. And there's a disconnect most of the time, and they get impatient. It's the same thing that happened with the EcoBank transaction when we were requested by PIC to broaden our broad-basedness and invite NGOs, invite broad-based groups, and we did, including the Nelson Mandela Foundation and many other prominent ones. But after 5 years, the option lapsed, those shares fell away. Guess what reaction we got when we went back there to tell them that those shares that we gave you that are no longer there? Here's the letter from the PIC. The anger and the frustration from those broad-based groupings, we understand we could consume that. In actual fact, in that transaction, we didn't even go to those broad-based groupings to ask them to contribute to the money that PIC wanted us to contribute. We took the risk ourselves and say, you know, you don't go ask NGOs and everybody, you take the risk and fund them, and that's what we did. So when we lost that capital that we put in there, we are the only ones that suffered. Even though we were 35% shareholders, we carried the 65% other shareholders. Yeah. So that's a problem that you find.
Okay. But just a quick one there is that, I mean, why don't these big groups, when they sort of reinvest some money, they just say maybe some parts needs to be paid out to these community groups? Because community groups, all they're after is cash on the ground, you know. They're not after the growth in the shares. They need the money now, you know. And I mean, why can't you take a portion of it and say these dividends are going to this group and us as entrepreneurs who are not getting dividends?
You cannot discriminate against shareholders. You have to treat all shareholders equally. You cannot distribute a dividend to one shareholder and not distribute to others. So you need to have sufficient resources to distribute to everyone. And if you don't have enough to distribute to everyone, you rather reinvest. And that's the challenge that we'll face, because it becomes a legal issue. Why he got dividends, why we didn't. And people would not consider that this is an NGO. They'll just say, you know, we're also shareholders. Legally speaking, we have shares. We've got a document of title, a share certificate. So I think that's the challenge that you'll find.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I assume, Mr. Msele, with these matters, what you're saying, 2.3, you know, setting up of trust and so forth, are matters that are put in your proposals to the PIC that this is what we're going to do? Or is it something that you do thereafter?
No. This does not. The trust that we've established, we established by ourselves, not because we were looking for funding or any support anywhere. It was just our civic duty to say we need to bring broad-based partners that will benefit as we grow as a company.
But the PIC would expect you to have that.
PIC does expect that, yeah. They ask you about your BE credentials, if you include broad-based groupings, and that's what that's why we also believe we should do that.
Can you just perhaps tell me who Amaduma is?
Amaduma is a company of, I think there are around 10 individuals, and they've created an entity. They also have shares, I think around 6% of Sakamoto Group.
So they have invested in Sakamoto?
Yes. They didn't put cash. We also allocated them shares when we...
You have just given them a shareholding in Sakamoto?
Like we did with the two trusts. So no one paid cash.
So they also have not received anything yet?
No.
And are they the only ones? Is there anyone else in this that would have a similar role to Amaduma?
There's the shareholder. My family trust is a shareholder. It also has not received any dividend.
Perhaps it would be useful to just give us a structure of Sakamoto and the different shareholdings within that.
Okay.
And which ones have been gifted by you in that sense of coming in as shareholders, and for what reason? Is it because you're already an empowerment company So Amaduma, is that a business entity, or is it an NGO, or what is its role?
It's a company of individuals that we gave shares to at Sakumnoto. So
It's an empowerment of an empowerment.
it's an empowerment entity.
Okay, and what role do they play in the company? Or do they play an active role? Do they have,
No, they don't play an active role.
they're just a passive recipient
Yes, yeah,
of
they're passive
your largesse?
shareholders, yes.
But
Yeah.
if they didn't put anything in, and you've simply gifted them the stake, why would you do that?
Because you are, like we gave to the trusts.
Yes, but this is a business.
No, it's not an operating business. They're just not, they are inactive. They're not operational.
But I don't understand why you would do that. I mean, the trusts, I understand, you want there to be beneficiaries that are education or for a social good. This is a beneficiary of 10 individuals that you've gifted.
Yes.
So what is the relationship, and why would you have chosen that? I mean, can anybody else come along and say, hey, we also want 8% or 10% of what your business is?
Amaduma were not given by Sakumnoto those shares. They were given by me from my portion of my shares. So, and you yourself, if you have shares, you can give either to a group or to individuals or to trusts. So, and there's no regulation law.
No, I understand that.
That says you can give to this group and not to the other.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to understand who the component parts and beneficiaries are.
There are some of my relatives in Amaduma.
Okay.
And that was the reason.
Okay.
So
there's a family trust, and Amaduma is
yes,
extended family in a way.
It's extended family members, not close family members. And there's also other people who are not family members but who are part of that.
Before we move on to the next paragraph, have you received any donations in the 82 nation countries that you have launched chapters of this trust?
We have received a few donations, I think less than 2 million. And, but the donations that we've has been substantial came from Sakumnoto. In other words, what we do as the group, we've incubated this, we've given them office space, we give them volunteers, some of our staff volunteer in order to cut their costs, and then we support their activities. So that's how we really support them. In 2.5, we just explained the company's mission, which is the broad-based economic empowerment, and in other instances, we form joint ventures with like-minded partners, and we also want to ensure access by small players in some of the transactions. Now, number 3, I come to the testimony of Mr. Lawrence Mlauzi. Mr. Lawrence Mlauzi, in a statement to the PIC Commission, raises 3 main issues of contention.
2.
I just correct that because there's 3.1 to 3.3.
So it's 3.
Yes, just for correction, Commissioner. The main issue of contention raised in his statement are that Sakumnoto was imposed on Kilikep at an advanced stage of Tosaka transaction, and the PIC did not conduct a full due diligence on Sakumnoto for purposes of Tosaka transaction, as it did on Kilikep, and that there's a fee, transaction fees in the amount of 100 million were paid in respect of Tosaka transaction as a result of the merger between the two consortiums. The above-mentioned issues raised by Mr. Mulauzi's statement, although not expressly stated, seem to allude to an unethical and possibly a corrupt relationship between the Public Investment Corporation and Sakumnoto. As the chairman of Sakumnoto, I should state at the outset that I view the above-mentioned issues and the undertone of unethical conduct by Sakumnoto with utmost seriousness. The issues in question do affect the reputation of a well-established company which has become known in the industry for its integrity and cannot be left unchallenged. As I have indicated, this is not the first time such allegations have been leveled against Sakumnoto. I have previously, on behalf of Sakumnoto, issued a statement in direct response to an article that had previously appeared in the Sunday Times on 24 February 2009. The statement was issued on or about 11 March 2019, and a copy thereof is attached in Annexure SM1. Sakumnoto welcomes the invitation by the PIC Commission and Advocate Level to make these submissions. In order for the Commission to have an appreciation of the type of business transactions that Sakumnoto engages in, I will briefly set out two of the major transactions that we've been involved in, namely the EcoBank transaction, ETI, the Zambezi Platinum transaction. It is important that I set out this transaction in my statement as they will illustrate to the Commission how we previously interacted with the PIC. I will also later deal with the Tosaka transaction, which Mr. Mulaudzi raised at the PIC Commission. 4, the EcoBank Transactional Incorporated, ETI. This was the first transaction that we presented to the PIC. This transaction involved the acquisition of 20% of the shareholding in ETI. I must just add this, Commissioner, with your permission, that EcoBank Group operates banks in 36 African countries and in 4 other countries outside of Africa. It has the largest footprint amongst all banks in the continent. 4.2. After almost a period of 2 years of evaluation processes and due diligence, the PIC decided to invest in ETI. This was the PIC's first investment in Africa. Probably that's the reason why they took long to finalize that transaction, because they had to travel in different countries, do due diligence, and their transaction advisors. The PIC took directly the 10% through its listed equities and warehoused 10% for the Mpilo Financial Services, which was a BE consortium that we led.
Why would they have done that?
That's a structure that they proposed, so that they will take 10% directly and invest it through equities, and then they will warehouse the 10% for the BE, and instead of issuing the shares for the BE consortium, PIC gave it a call option to acquire the shares of ETI when the ETI share price reached a strike price of US 25 cents per share. The call option was to lapse after 5 years. I must also say this, that these shares at the time, the value of those shares, ETI shares at the time when the transaction was done, was 16 US cents. But PIC and the consortium secured those shares at 8 US cents. So it was a huge discount. So they really created value when the transaction was done. So initially the share...
And these are the shares that ended up being forfeited?
Yes, these are the shares that we forfeited.
Fell away.
Yeah, they had theirs and we forfeited ours as BE. And so initially those shares performed well, and then of course the markets in West Africa went sour, and the major exposure was in Nedbank in Nigeria, and they went south, but also we understand that after we exited, the EcoBank started performing better.
Before you proceed further, can you just briefly tell the Commission who introduced EcoBank to the PIC? Because from previous testimony before this Commission, we know that originally there was no mandate for the PIC to invest in Africa?
I do address that.
Do you
in the
come to that?
statement. I
Thank
do
you.
come to that in the statement.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yes, yeah, it is covered in the statement somewhere. So to illustrate the value of those shares at the time, Nedbank bought 20% of the ETI shares 18 months later for almost double the amount. I think it was around 283 million for the same amount of shares. So PIC had done a good deal buying those shares. 4.3, during the 5-year call option.
Sorry. Just staying on 4.2, what was the total transaction value for the 20% that the PIC bought, you know, the direct shares and the other 10%?
So 50-50, because they paid 250 million.
Yes.
But remember, the other 10% for BE was sitting with PIC.
Yes.
We never had the share certificates, so they were
Yes,
just
it does.
warehoused depending on the performance of the share price.
Yeah.
And if it didn't perform, they took those shares.
Yes, it
So,
was
but
125
It was
million.
125 that was set
million,
aside.
your portion, and
Our
it was
portion, yes.
full 10% on call option.
Yes, we had full 10% on call option.
All right.
And are you talking here of rands or dollars?
So this is dollars.
These are US dollars.
It was US dollars.
dollars.
200, yeah.
So what, it was a 3 billion rand sort of transaction, 4 billion rand around there? What was
no,
the
it
rand
was,
amount?
I think it was around 2.5 billion.
2.5
at the
billion.
time, yeah.
All right. And then getting the shares at 8 cents a share that, you know, the PIC got when the shares were trading at 16 cents a share. How did that happen?
Well, we negotiated strongly because they wanted investors from SADC and South Africa. I cover that later in the statement.
Cover that,
And
okay.
yes, yeah. Okay. And we negotiated to get a good deal.
Yeah.
And they also saw PIC as a strategic. They looked at it long term. And so they made a special consideration.
All right. Okay. All right. To address the fees, I mean, were fees paid, transaction fees and everything, you do address that somewhere?
For this transaction, at the time, yeah, there was 1% fee that was paid for transaction advisors. Our advisors was Ernst & Young, if I remember.
Ernst & Young,
Yeah.
okay. Which is what, a $2.5 million US dollar fee? Is that correct? 1%
around
of
there, yeah.
250 million?
I can't remember the exact amount
You
because
can't
of the
remember
exchange
the
rate, but it was around 1%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
4.3, during the 5-year call option period, the ETI share price never reached the strike price and in fact deteriorated because of the market conditions in West Africa and Nigeria in particular. The call option lapsed and we tried to request for the extension of the call option, but PIC refused to grant us the extension of the call option. In actual fact, in addition to that, if I may add, Commissioner, we also negotiated for the reduction of the strike price and or that the price of the strike price be changed from US denomination to the rand denomination. And PIC refused bluntly and to negotiate with us. We further tried to negotiate at least for the return of the call option amount paid to PIC so we could at least return it to investors. And the PIC was not persuaded. So the call option lapsed and we lost that investment as well as the 10 million rand we had invested buying the call option. So the letter from the PIC confirming the termination of the call option is attached here too as annexure SM2. So I just want to say there also, Commissioner, with your permission, that being their first big transaction in Africa and exposing black economic empowerment to the continent for the first time, and in an asset that has that kind of platform, 36 African countries, 4 countries after that, we took time to negotiate and facilitate that transaction. It was our transaction which we brought to PIC. So literally, if you look at it now, it's almost like PIC hijacked the transaction. They sit with the shares, whatever value comes long-term, we're out. And even the contribution we made, we've lost. So, and if you were to find unfairness and an unjust enrichment, this is it. And so, and that's why it hurts us when people say Sakunoto is favored by the PIC, when this is an example of how strict PIC was to us. Even when we told them that there are a lot of NGOs, including Nelson Mandela Foundation, who are asking for meetings, asking for feedback, asking about the performance of this investment. And when we sent them that letter, some of them plainly said, "You're lying, you know, and this is not true, and you want to hijack this deal for yourself." So we had to really go through serious pressures to explain ourselves out there in the market. So I just want to put it there that you may be aware. Commissioner.
Yeah, let me understand something about the BEE, a BEE part on the continent. I mean, does that work? I mean, is that applicable? Can you say you want a BEE transaction to invest on the continent?
No. It's a BEE, it's a South African BEE company, but exploring opportunities in the continent. We believe that has to be supported so that we don't just limit our growth to South African jurisdiction. And BEE companies have to grow beyond South Africa. It should not be established entities that grow. And the support for that is very important from financial institutions such as PIC. Remember, we brought the transaction, and interestingly, EcoBank, being a Pan-African bank, wanted black investors. They wanted black investors, African investors, to invest in EcoBank. That was a direct. I served in that board for 5 years, and I actually deal with it in the next.
Yeah, tell me then, what kind of value would a BEE group bring to EcoBank, which is based in Nigeria or Ghana and all that? Just if you could add something there.
First of all, I've introduced my background, that I worked as the CEO of the Chambers of Commerce here in South Africa, and in the SADC region, and in the continent. So they looked into my profile and said, here's a South African that has a Pan-African approach. I've traveled Africa, 43 countries. But, and I've traveled with EcoBank to many places to raise funds for the bank, to assist them, including PIC, IFC, ADB, etc., because of the networks that I had established in my previous roles as the president of Pan-African Chamber of Commerce or CEO of the Association of SADC Chambers. There was a lot of value that we added to EcoBank. But also for them in interacting with the government stakeholders here in South Africa and in the SADC region. We've set up meetings for them, facilitated a lot of discussions for them to explore expanding the bank in other nations, in other nations in the SADC region.
All right, and so you think that the PIC should be funding BEE groups to invest in the continent, whether it's in telecoms or wherever? Yes,
because the growth, if the continent is the future. So South African market is saturated. So there's a lot of new opportunities out there to be explored in virtually every sector in the continent. And currently there are few BEE groups that go to explore those opportunities. It's just established entities. So I believe BEE is losing a lot by being focused only in South Africa. And if BEE grows into the continent and expands into new opportunities, the PIC as an investor in those BEE benefits, because the growth of that BEE is the growth of the funders and the partners that support that BEE.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. 5, Zambezi Platinum transaction. On or about June 2012, we heard in the market that ENRC, a foreign-owned diversified mining group, was planning to divest or exit Africa and was planning to sell 13.5% shares in Northern Platinum, as well as in the Bukai Platinum project in Zimbabwe. We prepared a proposal for the acquisition of these shares for NRC, who were keen to dispose of their shares, but again, they also wanted confirmation that we will have funding should they accept our proposal. The interaction between us and PIC was protracted. During that time, we learned that the PIC had bought from the market the shares that previously belonged to the old BE consortium of Northam. The Northam shares were pledged as security to one of the big banks and were taken by the bank after the BE consortium had defaulted on its payment, and the BE consortium was not able to service that debt. We learned that those shares were warehoused by PIC for future BE companies. We then approached PIC regarding the acquisition of these shares. During that time, Northern Platinum was also in discussion with its old BE partners to issue new shares in order to rectify its BE status. There were two parallel processes running at the same time, both dealing with the acquisition of shares in Northern Platinum. The processes took almost 2 years. PIC was also approached by Northern and former BE partners to support the transaction. The PIC later advised both consortiums that were interested that they were engaged with two proposals that relate to the same company, Northam, and advised the BE consortium to meet and work together, as this was logistically going to be easy for the PIC.
Can you give the names of the other consortiums?
The other consortium was ATISA. It was a consortium led by ATISA.
ADISA.
ATISA.
And that was the former Northam,
yes, partner.
the one
yes.
that couldn't pay back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There were other partners working with ATISA, I believe, but the lead consortium group was ATISA.
So in essence, it's a similar question here in this transaction of Northam, that the PIC said, there's two consortiums, I don't want to choose between you, get together and see if you can join up.
Yeah, but our approach was different. PIC was looking at ensuring that they don't do one deal and then later on do another. So they thought it's better to do them at the same time because they involved the same entity, Northam.
Yeah, but I'm saying that is exactly the same
Yes,
as what
yes, you can
happened
say
with yourselves and Kili.
Yes, you can say that, Commissioner.
So this, you would say in the interactions with yourselves and the PIC, out of the 4 transactions that you indicated you had earlier, 2 of them, the PIC said join with another consortium.
Yeah, they said we should talk. They didn't force us, they said...
That's not the
yes.
question.
Okay.
I mean, it's a question of simply saying, if you want our money,
yes,
talk to each other and
yes.
come up with a proposal.
Yes, that's what we
Yeah.
did. Thank you. So the joint consortium called Zambezi Platinum concluded its transaction in 2015. This transaction was funded jointly by PIC and Coronation, and there were no transactions paid by the PIC to the consortium. 6.
Sorry, before you proceed.
Sorry there.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry there. So Northam, is it part of the Marikana? I mean, the mines in Northam are in Marikana. Is
No.
that correct?
No.
Is the other one?
It's Lonmin.
Lonmin, sorry. Okay.
Yes, it's Lonmin.
Sorry, yes. Okay.
Mr. Commissioner, before we proceed, is it a convenient time to have the tea adjournment, or would you like to proceed?
Yeah, finished. It's now Tosaka.
That's my problem this week. Can we take tea adjournment and come back at 20 past, please? Thank you.
Well-funded campaigns waged by our opponents in this key province. The IFP has overtaken the Democratic Alliance.
Yes, Mr. Mselegu, you're still under oath.
Chairman, Commissioner, with your permission, I'd just like to clarify the last question, my response to the last question asked by Commissioner Marcus with regards to, she made a reference to the fact that the Zambezi Platinum transaction seemed to be similar to Kilikap Sakumnoto transaction. I just want to clarify that the difference in the northern transaction or Zambezi transaction, the old BE partners did not come to PIC for funding. It's only us who came for funding. What they needed from PIC was just support as the major shareholder of Northern at the time. In other words, to say they support their transaction because Northern was going to issue new shares to the old BE consortium, and we needed funding. So it was completely different. So they didn't fund the joint consortium. They only funded us. So that's the difference.
Can you just look at the last sentence on 5.3?
5.3. Yes.
So you're saying that in the PIC was also approached by Northern and the former BE partner to support the transaction? Are you saying they were approached to support Sakamoto in this transaction or the new consortium in the transaction, not to fund themselves? So on what basis were they going to the PIC?
No, the support they needed, the old BE consortium, was that because they were doing their own transaction, which was to issue new shares to the old BE. So PIC was a shareholder in Northern and needed to support that. That's the support they needed. They did not need funding. So all shareholders needed to concur, to consent.
Okay, so it was an approval to Northern to do the changes to the new consortium?
Yeah, to issue new shares.
To issue those shares?
Yeah, to the...
And therefore it was part of the original funding by the PIC? I mean, PIC funded Northern in the first place, although they bought shares in the first place into the original BE.
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So it was a question that PIC in the original BEE
Yeah.
and approval or support to move that funding into,
To support the new,
to support
us.
that it
and-
would change and the funding would stay.
Yes. And
So they
but-
did fund it.
No, no, no. They
There was
didn't
no
fund-
new money, they did fund, they didn't remove the funding.
No, no. PIC funded the new BE consortium, not the old BE consortium. The old BE consortium was funded separately. But they needed...
Funded separately by the PIC.
No, no, no.
So why did they have to go at all to the PIC if there was no PIC
It
involvement
was
in the original?
the support of shareholders that was required
Shareholders in Northam.
in Northern. They all needed to, major
Concur.
shareholders needed to consent to the transaction. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just a follow-up there. So this deal was a 2 billion rand deal, isn't it?
Yes, around there, yeah.
And what has happened to the share price like since then and all that? Is
Well,
is it performing
It's
well?
performing
What-
well. Now it's performing well. The first year and a half, it was, the entire platinum sector was depressed, but now it's gone very up and it's performing well. At the time when we bought, the shares were 43 rand per share. And last time I checked, last week, they were hovering between 58 rand and 62 rand, somewhere there. So the share price is performing well. And the company has grown in asset values, has
Yes.
invested in new projects and expanded the mining.
Okay.
So the net asset value is massive.
Sort of, have they paid the dividends, for you guys to meet the interest portion that the PIC has been funding you?
PIC funded us through preference shares. They do get their payments, yes. Pref shareholders get their payment.
Yeah.
Ordinary shareholders like us don't get.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so they've been paying.
So
that,
you
the
are
pref,
paying the PIC somehow. It's not
Yes.
enough, but there is something
They are, yes,
being paid.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Number 6, Sakumnoto's initial introduction to the Tosaka transaction. On or about 5 June 2015, it was brought to our attention by Nedbank Corporate Finance Division, the corporate advisors, that Qalulo Investments Pty Ltd, Qalulo, had taken a decision to dispose its 30.5% shareholding and voting control in Tosaka Pty Ltd. The corporate advisors invited Sakumnoto to participate in the bid. The corporate advisors had been entrusted with the responsibility of running with the process of finding the purchaser of the said shares. This transaction was also referred to as Project Atlas. Potential bidders were invited through the corporate advisors to submit an indicative, non-binding offer for the tender sale interest. This indicative, non-binding offer was to be submitted by the potential bidders by no later than 12 o'clock on 12 June 2015. A copy of the information memorandum relating to this transaction is attached here too as Annexure SM3. Sakumnoto expressed its interest and submitted all the requisite documentation by the stipulated time. We were advised by the corporate advisors that this invitation was extended to a number of bidders who were credible BE companies. It is important to note that Sakumnoto had been in the industry for 15 years at the time, and it was befitting that it also made the invite list. We cannot confirm whether Kilicap received the aforementioned invitation from corporate advisors at the time or not, nor can we confirm whether this is also how Kilicap was introduced to the transaction, or if they were introduced to the transaction under different circumstances. On or about 19 June 2015, we received another letter from Nedbank.
Sorry, can I just ask you something about 6.6?
Yes.
If you can't confirm that, basically, if I understand the the way the process unfolded was that you were both bidders and the PIC said, talk to each other. In that process, would you not have discussed with Kilimanjaro how they came to know about the deal so that when you're coming to be the joint proposers to the PIC that you've come together and created this new company, that you would have an understanding of how they came to the deal and how you came to the deal? Wouldn't that have been part of the discussion of 6.6?
No, at the time it was not necessary for us. We didn't see it as a necessary requirement. All we appreciated was that they were also shortlisted with us. So how they came,
but just
we assumed.
Out of interest, out of curiosity,
assumed,
this is going to be your partner. Surely you want to know how they came to be interested in that deal or how they got to know about it? Was it because of the short timeline that you had to come to a decision?
There was a short timeline, but we also assumed that they came through the process the same way we did.
But wouldn't you, I'm asking because the question of integrity, common purpose, values, etc., did you just say, fine, they've come through the process, whoever they are, that's okay, we're going to go together? Wouldn't you have normally, in a normal circumstance, say, who are these guys, what about them, where do they come from, how did they get involved in this deal? Just out of the sheer knowledge of who your partner is going to be.
It's a very good question, Commissioner. In actual fact, when we deal with the due diligence part, we see it as three-part. First is the due diligence on the investment, on the entity. The second one is on the applicant, like us. And the third one is actually, which is what we're supposed to have done. But time did not allow us because we had a short time frame to submit a binding offer. We needed to do due diligence on each other. And I think we've learned a good lesson through this investment to also do due diligence on our partners.
So the pressure of the deal was so great that you did not look at the potential risk in
Correct.
relation to each other.
Yes.
And then the fact that you're here today questioning their testimony provided by your partner, what's that going to do to the relationship between the two of you? I mean, you're working together on a deal, your joint initiative. I mean, partnership is about confidence and trust. Is this going to have an impact?
Well, I agree that partnership is about confidence and trust. And if one party breaches that trust, and you find ways of working. But we are in the commission here and we have to deal honestly and tell the truth. And then we can fix our relationship, because in business you don't have to be friends. You know, shareholders and investors in companies do not have to like each other or to be friends. They are joined together by the business opportunity. So you can work together as business people without necessarily being friends.
You don't have to be friends, but you do have to have an element of trust. Did you discuss with Kilimanjaro prior to coming to this commission your concerns about the evidence presented?
Let me tell you, Commissioner, it became so difficult to engage them, because when your partners come to the commission and make the kind of statement they've made, which are false allegations, defamatory allegations, which prejudice your business and good name, you don't know if you can trust engaging, or whether your engagement will be misconstrued and twisted later on. So one decided to take a cautious approach and not engage.
Yeah, a question for me on 6.5. You mentioned that, and I think this question probably is for Nedbank, but if you can assist, I would appreciate that. 6.5, you say Nedbank wanted credible BEE companies, all right? Meaning probably they can pay for the transaction. But doesn't this exclude new BEE groupings that want to enter the market and make their mark? You know, my worry is that it looks like transactions are going to the same BEE groupings, and given what I've just seen in terms of the invite, new BEE groupings are not given a chance to participate in these transactions.
Commissioner, I cannot answer for Nedbank and the old BEE partners who were selling the shares as to why they set up that criteria. But they did say to us they're looking for credible BE partners that have a track record and that could support funding, and that are broad-based and that have a track record in the market. So, and that's what they said to us. So I'm just relating what their criteria.
Yes, and what's your view? Do you have any view about that?
No, it would be difficult for me to have a view on that because I was one of the applicants and I didn't set the criteria.
All right, okay.
Thank you. 6.7, on or about 19 June 2015, we received another letter from Nedbank indicating that all the shareholders of Tosaka, excluding the staff share trust, had met and decided to sell shares in Tosaka. All the bidders were required to give a revised offer and proposed purchase price by 30th June 2015 for the 91.8% Tosaka shares. During this time, we approached the PIC to request a letter of support for the transaction. On 30th June 2015, PIC gave us a conditional letter of support, which we believed was a standard letter given to all the bidders, indicating they are committed to fund the preferred bidder or subsequent purchaser pursuant to the bidding process. The potential bidders were all thereafter then required to revise their previous offers in light of the seller's wish to sell more shares than what was initially indicated. In light of the above, it is unclear on how Sakumnoto could have been imposed on Kilikep and the transaction in question, considering the fact that the transaction came about as a tender where Nedbank Corporate Finance Division, as the corporate advisors, had invited bidders, including Sakumnoto. On or about 1st July 2015, we received a letter from Nedbank informing us that our consortium had been selected to participate in the next phase of the proposed transaction. We were required to submit a binding offer to the corporate advisors in accordance with the process letter by 12 on Friday, 31st July 2015. This process letter required Sakumnoto to submit a number of documents, namely proof of the value offered in the binding offer, proof of ability to fund directly or through third parties, comprehensive comments on the draft legal agreements, and confirmation of the ability to close the transaction with minimum number of suspensive conditions or conditions precedents. The written binding offers were to be submitted to Nedbank by Friday, 31st July 2015. And I would therefore invite and urge Mr. Mlawitz to perhaps finish the PIC Commission with the signed binding engagement letter that Kilikep had received from the PIC, which implied exclusivity to Kilikep. As far as I'm aware, the engagement letter that the PIC gave was for the consortium. I attach here to a copy marked SM4. If you go through that engagement letter, SM4, in your documents, you'll see on paragraph 2.1, on page 2, paragraph 2.1, that engagement letter included the joint consortium. In 2.1 it says, the proposed transaction entails the investment in Kilimanjaro Sakumnoto Consortium Pty Limited, Kisako, in the form of senior debt facility for purposes of financing Kisako to acquire 100% of Tosaka, 100% of Tosaka retail and 91.8% of Main Street, which owns 100% of Tosaka, a BE consortium that has a 25 shareholding stake in Total South Africa Pty Ltd.
I don't think anyone's disputing that. And I think it might be helpful, Advocate Libba, if you could go back to the submission by Mr. Mulawodzi, because I think he also had an attachment of the letter from the PIC to them as an appendix. And what I recall that he said at the time, and obviously it is subject to the facts that it would show, was that he interpreted that letter as support for their initiative to Nedbank. He didn't claim that it was different from this. There were two processes. The first was, if I recall, a letter at that time, and then this letter, which is clearly to the consortium. There's no dispute about that. I think it's just the question of what Mr. Malaudzi understood about his communication with the PIC. So I wouldn't want us to get stuck on this question. I don't think there's any dispute that SM4 is for the consortium.
It is noted, and I will follow it up immediately.
Please, let's just get that so that we can be clear about whether there was a misunderstanding around that letter. I might be incorrect, but I seem to recall having that, given the number of documents that we've got, there was an appendix to his submission which contained a letter from the PIC, which he had interpreted in a particular way. I just would like us to refresh our memories on that. It does not in any way contradict what is here in SM4.
Through you, Commissioner, if I can just clarify why we deal with that, is because we read his statement and we saw on YouTube his understanding and presentation to the Commission was that that letter was exclusively for Kilikep.
No, I understand that, but that's
an exclusive right.
Yeah, it was a question that he was raising. That's why I've asked, let's just get the exact letter itself,
Okay.
because I remember that was his statement.
Yes.
But that was prior to the PIC, which you follow, and that's why I say let's not get stuck here.
Okay.
Because what you follow in your testimony now is important in relation to it, because there was a sequence of events.
Yes.
And
Okay.
this letter SM4 followed the events that are contained in Section 7.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just check something here. So didn't you and Mr. Mulaudzi have a meeting with Dr. Majila about this issue?
We are coming to that.
You are
We'll
coming to
cover
that one,
yes.
okay, all right.
Number 7, following receipt of the letter and acknowledgement that Sakunoto had been selected for the next phase of the proposed transaction, I requested a meeting with the PIC CEO, Dr. Dan Majila, in order to discuss a request for funding, should Sakunoto be the ultimate successful bidder. It is important to note that at this point, most bidders were given an expression of interest for funding from the PIC. This was, however, non-binding. In my discussion with Dr. Majila, I had intended on securing a binding offer letter from the PIC to provide funding in relation to this transaction. Dr. Majila expressly indicated to me that he was not prepared to engage with any of the bidders, as he was approached by many bidders requesting funding for the same transaction. Dr. Majila emphasized that PIC liked the total asset and that it is a good investment from their analysis, but the PIC would only engage with the preferred bidder or an entity that would have exclusivity on the transaction. This sentiment is supported by the letter addressed to me from the PIC, which is attached here to as Annexure SM5. If we go there, you'll see his emphasis on the conditions that he's put in there, that paragraph 2 and 3, we understand that the proposed transaction is intended to be carried out through a bidding action process to enable the sellers to identify the preferred purchasers, and that each of the bidders may require and or invite funding suitors for the proposed transaction. We write to confirm that the Public Investment Corporation, acting as representative of clients, have been approached by some bidders in the proposed transaction and is interested and hereby wishes to express its commitment to participate in the funding of the preferred bidder and subsequent purchaser pursuant to the bidding process. in the proposed transaction, and in particular, the funding of the purchase price once determined. So there, exactly what he said to me verbally is confirmed in writing, that we all had to finish the bidding process. The process was not on PIC to determine who is the winning bidder. So the PIC would only consider funding once there's only one person, one group that was selected by Nedbank and the sellers. (7.3). Dr. Machila also indicated to me that after our meeting, he was going to meet with Mr. Lawrence Mulaudzi of Kilikep to explain the same situation. Unbeknown to me, Dr. Machila had scheduled to meet us both on the same day, but at different times, in order to address the same issues. Mr. Mulaudzi had also come to follow up on his funding application. Dr. Machila informed me that Mulaudzi will also be given the same response as that provided to me. Number 8, Sakumnoso's first encounter with Mr. Mulaudzi and Okilikep. Following my unsuccessful meeting with Dr. Mulaudzi to try and secure a binding offer for funding from the PIC, I then proceeded to follow Dr. Machila to the boardroom where Mr. Mulaudzi was. Dr. Machila introduced us to each other just as a courtesy and told Mr. Mulaudzi in front of me what he had told me. That is that the PIC was not prepared to engage with any of the bidders, but only the winners.
Sorry, can I ask you there? I mean, in reading this, would it be normal to take one bidder into a meeting with another bidder in their presence and tell them what you expect? Why would you have followed Dr. Machila to a second meeting at all? He's had a discussion with you, he has a discussion with Mr. Mulaudzi, his question is there. So basically, I mean, did you not find it strange that you were taken into a meeting with a competitive bidder?
No. First, I was personally curious to know who the other
You can be as curious
bidder.
as you like. You don't go into a meeting by a funder with another bidder.
No,
I mean, you can be as curious as you like, but I mean, why would you go in? I mean, and why would he allow it?
No, there were two
What
reasons.
would have happened before that? What would have happened if it had been reversed? That Mr. Mulaudzi came into a meeting with you. How would you have interpreted that?
No, I wouldn't have minded, because I think all bidders were curious to know who were other bidders, who were their competitors. That's a normal curiosity. But
There's a normal curiosity.
No,
if
in
it was
business,
a bank,
yes, definitely. You definitely
if it was,
are
it's
curious.
absolutely normal curiosity, but if I am a funder,
Yeah.
I would not go to one bidder, take that bidder into a room with another bidder. There's something wholly inappropriate. Did you not see it as inappropriate?
Well, he didn't take me there. I followed him because.
Well, he has the right to say no.
The second
Why are you
reason-
coming into my meeting?
The second reason was to ensure that the same response given to me is given to the other bidder. That
But
way
that's
there's
not
no-
your business.
that
You're
it's
a
not- There's
different
no
consortium.
favoritism.
It can't be, he could have 20 bidders. The question is, it's his responsibility to ensure that he's giving the same information, not yours. Was the purpose not to introduce you to Mr. Mulaudzi?
No. I don't think it was deliberately to introduce us, but it was to, he did say that there are a number of bidders that have been there.
Right.
And in actual fact, he's going to meet one of them to tell him the same thing.
That's
the
fine.
same story.
Perfectly
so that,
fine.
That's really the reason. I've just followed out of my own curiosity.
And
But
he let you
actually,
in? But he let you in? And proceeded to
Yeah, he didn't
introduce you to Mr. Mulaudzi?
Yeah, I was not dismissed. So and when I got in there, he said, "Here's Mr. Mulaudzi, another bidder who's approached us, and I'm giving him the same response that we will not entertain any bidder. We'll only deal when we have a final bidder." So that was my understanding. I didn't see anything odd with that.
And consequently, you sat down together and decided to do 50-50.
Yeah, that Dr. Machila left the room.
Sure.
And then we sat together and said, we entrepreneurs, and said, bro, look, we are bidding for the same asset. There's only going to be one winner.
I think you need to be a little more
winners.
frank than this. I think that this is a little bit disingenuous on your part. I'm sorry. If I am a funder, I take you and introduce you, I meet with you, I'm going to say the same to both of you. I take you both into a room, introduce you to each other and leave. I am giving you a message. Did you not realize that you were being given a message? You came to the conclusion yourselves out of that message, surely.
No, I don't think we were given a message. It was within us to refuse to bring our consortium together because
of course.
We believe we had a very strong consortium and with great potential. So, but when you're at that level of bidding, all you want to do is to succeed. So if you meet your competitors, you need to negotiate and agree to join forces. Business people do that all the time.
Absolutely. Business people do it all the time, and he had already indicated to you who he was going to see, right? In your meeting, he said he was going to see Mr. Malawutsi.
Yes, he did say that. Yeah.
So it was up to you then, as you would do as a normal business, to say, oh, I'll approach him later, to actually go into the same room. I'm questioning the validity of taking you in, introducing you, and leaving, and thinking you're not getting a message. Come on.
No, I didn't take it that way. From the benefit of the hindsight, based on your question,
I accept it. You didn't take it that way.
I could have later investigated who was this Mlawutsi and called him myself and met him separately. I could have done that from the benefit of the hindsight to deal with that perception. And I think at the time I didn't think about that. There was just this curiosity and also this pressure of time frame to close the transaction. So I think you're right. Maybe what I should have done was to just simply walk away and then investigate on myself as to who is this Mr. Mlawutsi, set up our own meeting without using that process, that opportunity there. So I just wanted to clarify there.
Before you proceed with that, can I just ask you, can you remember what date was this meeting with Dr. Machila and Mr. Mlawutsi?
I think that, I cannot remember the date, but I can remember the event that triggered us.
The reason why I'm asking you this is in Annexure SM5, you receive a letter dated 30 June. And it is signed by Dr. Machila about the letter of support, and the reference is Mr. Benedict Mongale.
Yes.
The next day, the 1st of July, you received this letter by Dr. Machila talking about the transaction between the new consortium. Exactly a day later. So there's the new consortium now.
Yes. I think the issue there was this pressure of the time frame. You see the timetable that
the reason why I'm asking, it seems to me that meeting must have been on the 30th of June or early on the 1st of July.
I agree. It must have been somewhere there. We met after we got notification from Nedbank that we were shortlisted as preferred bidder and that we needed to submit proof of funding. That's when we all called PIC to request a meeting to say we've now been notified. The only requirement that's standing between us and the transaction was proof of funding. And I think that's the reason why we came at the same day with Dr. Mlawutsi and the time frames that were there for us to submit that letter.
And I think what has triggered the interest of the Commission is that according to Mr. Mlawutsi's own evidence, he was a start-up company, Gillicap. You walk into a boardroom with the CEO of the PIC, he introduces you to this person you have never met in your life, and suddenly there's a new consortium. I think that's what triggered the interest.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. But I just I deal with it later, maybe I can address briefly here, because I think it's important for the Commission to know that even though we met at the PIC, you know, the assumption by Mr. Mlaudzi is that there may have been some corrupt relationship between the PIC and Sakumnoto. And there's not been any of that. And so in other words, there was no reason, no benefit for the PIC or for Dr. Machila to facilitate. There was nothing I was going to gain. So, so there was no ill intent, there was no personal benefit for him to do that. So, and I think that's the reason why we try to explain this. And because people normally facilitate and help others if they have direct interest.
Can I just again try and assist you? Mr. Mulaudzi, in his statement presented to the Commission, paragraph 21.1, stated the following, which he repeated under oath. I then requested a meeting with Dr. Machila to clear this confusion, as the deadline for the binding offer was looming. Dr. Machila agreed to this meeting. It was held at the PIC offices. In that meeting, Dr. Machila told me that indeed he had another group which had interest in the transaction. He then told me that in order for him to proceed with issuing final approval, I needed to urgently meet with Mr. Mseleku of Sakumnoto at the other interested party. He also told me that Mr. Mseleku's company must merge with our company to form one consortium, and that we had to give Mr. Mseleku 50% of the transaction and the fees that we would ultimately receive when the deal is approved. So from his statement, it appears that he has a different sequence than you.
Correct. And the point I'm trying to make is that that sequence cannot be true, because I met Mr. Mlaudzi at the PIC offices, and after my meeting with Dr. Dan, and he introduced us, and then we sat and remained there. He just told us he's not going to fund any bidder except the one that's finally chosen as the winner, and he left.
You see, I'm asking this in paragraph 23. According to Mr. Mulaudzi, this meeting, the first meeting between the two of you, took place in your office.
That cannot be true. The first meeting was at PIC offices, and that's where, again, we exchanged our numbers after when we were together, and then agreed now to meet as two consortiums later at our offices, which was the meeting of the management of Sakumnoto and the management of Kilikep. In other words, with all other partners to discuss if it's appropriate for us to work together. So that was really a follow-up meeting, which was at our offices. Before then, we met at PIC, and my cell numbers, Mr. Mlaudzi, was given by me and not by Dr. Dan. So that's the correct version. That's our version of events. First meeting at PIC, and then the second meeting at our offices.
Can I just raise something so there's no confusion about it? This isn't looking at whether there was a corruption involved in this. The terms of reference, yes, impropriety, but we're also looking at governance.
The process, yes.
The processes.
Followed, yeah.
Did Dr. Machila meet with you, with anyone else in the room? Did PIC bring any other staff into the room?
No, it was me alone. I had gone there alone. There was no other staff. So
no, it was Dr. Machila from the PIC alone with you.
He was alone with me.
So there's no minutes, there's no record. This is discussing a deal, and I'm looking at the governance issues here, because it shouldn't be a dispute about who you remember, Mlaudzi remembers. There should be records of a meeting that takes a decision, that makes a recommendation. There was nothing recorded about this discussion. You didn't get a note from the PIC saying, further to our discussions on this date, I'd like to confirm that this is the approach of the PIC?
I think there was no minutes taken. It was an informal meeting just to update him that we've been shortlisted, and we're here to remind him that we really need the support.
Okay.
So there was no meet, and I think it was the same with Mr. Mlaudzi. He was alone there. So I don't think it was just going to be a short meeting, as it was. It didn't last long. To say,
short
please,
meeting with big consequences.
Yeah, just to say we need support, and we've got this pressure.
And can I just mention, okay, it's been consulted.
Yes, Commissioner, through you, there was a formal recording of that actually in SM5 because it just confirmed those discussions. He repeated what he said to us verbally.
That was a letter, wasn't it?
That's a letter, yes.
Yes. No, I think my colleague is talking about a
Minutes.
meeting. Yeah, minutes of a meeting
Okay.
where one would have expected would have taken place in order to deal with these matters. But what I wanted to say is just, I note that you are talking about a suggestion of a corrupt relationship. I don't read Mr. Mlautsi's statement like that, nor do I interpret it as evidence that he was suggesting or insinuating that there was a corrupt relationship between you. All he says is that I was there and Dr. Machila said this to me, and that's it. So the questions of corrupt relationship, I don't know. Maybe I should ask you, why do you suggest that he suggests that there's a corrupt relationship?
Because, Chair, the perception created by statements like that out there, we had a lot of business partners call us to inquire. And actually we have a number of transactions that are stalled because of that statement. So it may seem a simple statement, but its implications are vast on our business and on our reputation. That's the reason, because the same way we feel that that statement creates an impression that there was something irregular or illegal.
Or maybe favoritism.
You may say that, but many other people out there considers it as something illegal or unlawful. In particular, especially when Mr. Mlautsi said we were forced by the, we are forced on Kilikep by the PIC. That really goes into our integrity as a company, and our good name is tarnished by that, because we did not need to be forced. We were a company that could stand on their own bid. In actual fact, on the benefit of the hindsight, we think we should have not even raised the issue of partnership and just proceeded to bid on our own. We believe we had a stronger case.
Yeah. If I can recall, Mr. Mlautsi indicated that you were imposed onto this transaction, and that it felt that you and Dr. Machila know each other, to that effect, that you were imposed, and you imposed mainly because you knew each other and all that. If I can sort of recall that.
We couldn't have been imposed, but I deal with my knowledge of Dr. Machila as we continue in my statement. So to clarify how I got to know him in PIC. So we will come to that, and I think it will clarify.
Just before I forget this, to get the sequence right. SM4 attached to your statement is dated the 1st of July, 2015, and in paragraph 2.1, there's reference to this new consortium, Kisako. Is that correct?
Yes.
According to Mr. Mlautsi's statement, in paragraph 23, and I must read it into the record, after briefing my partners who were very devastated about this directive from Dr. Machila, they agreed under the circumstances that I contact Mr. Sipho Mseleku and arrange to meet with him. When we met, it was clear that he was up to speed. I concluded that Dr. Machila had fully briefed him. This was obviously also an introductory meeting because I did not know him and had never met him before. Even his contact details were given to me by Dr. Machila. This meeting took place at Mr. Mseleku's office. As a way forward, we agreed to enter into an agreement that will reflect the merger and newly formed consortium. This agreement, reflecting the new consortium, was signed on 6 August 2015. We then informed the PIC and Nedbank in writing of this merger for the purpose of this transaction. The project changed from being Kilikap to Kisaku. Now, this does not correspond and is not in sequence of the letter already written by the PIC on the 1st of July recognizing this new consortium of Tosaka. Can you clear this up?
As you see, that letter was addressed to Mr. Lawrence Mlaudzi, and he forwarded to us, and it was not sent to us. It's referred to him, so I got it from him. But
the point,
his statement...
The point I'm making, okay. The letter of the 1st of July addressed to Mr. Mlaudzi already refers in paragraph 2.1 to the new consortium Kisaku.
Yes.
Which according to Mr. Mlaudzi in his statement was only formally established on the 6th of August.
I think it's for Mr. Mlaudzi to respond to that, because the letter was addressed to him and the statement is made by him.
But what is important, what I want to find out, can you remember if the meeting between you and Mlaudzi in your office was on the 6th of August? Or before that, and it was signed? Can you remember whether the new consortium agreement was signed on the 6th of August? Do you have a copy of that agreement?
I think there is a letter that we signed and sent to Nedbank. I will refer it to it as I continue. The letter is SM6, dated 30th July, that deals with that, notifying Nedbank about our decision to merge.
30 July.
I think that's what it says. That's the letter that we sent. SM6.
Yes.
But Mr. Mseleko, I don't know what you say further in your statement. Was there any occasion where you met someone else or a committee at the PIC or from the PIC other than the CEO, Dr. Machila, in this whole transaction?
Yes, we met with the team that was responsible for the transaction. Tsepo and Benedict and some I can't remember their names, but there was a team that was reporting to Mr. Roy. We did meet with,
Thank you.
the team. Yes,
Sorry, was that as the joint consortium?
Yes, as a joint consortium. 8, on page 8. So I've covered that. .3. Sorry, 8.4.
I think you must deal with 8.2 as well.
Should I start with 8.2? It is a common cause that at the time that Tosaka transaction arose, Kilikap was a startup company and was new in the industry. They've said that they were established the same year in which the consortium, the transaction started. So when they joined the bidding process, I think they probably were 5 months old. That is why we say we don't know whether they were also invited by Nedbank to bid or they came through other process, because Nedbank had said to us they've invited established BEE companies that has a track record, etc. 8.3, after Dr. Machila introduced me to Mr. Mlaudzi and I had a brief discussion and mutually agreed that there can only be one winner. I think I've addressed that. and that we agreed to match and have 50% equity each in the transaction. 8.4, it is important to me to express that although Sakumnoto was confident in itself, considering that we were a previous long-standing client of the PIC, we had a good balance sheet to support our funding application, we had the requisite broad-based black economic empowerment rating, and we had been in the industry for 15 years at the time, we still considered it within our best interest to work with other BEE partners, such as Kilikep.
Mr. Mseleku, I'm sorry to worry you. In 8.3, can you just read the last two sentences into the record, just for record purposes?
8.3, last two sentences, starting
after 50-50.
The reason for us agreeing to merge the two consortium was that we can have a win-win situation and to increase both our chances of success. In business, it is better to have 50% than to lose everything with the hope of gaining 100%. So commercially, it made business sense for both of us.
Just going back, staying with 8.2, you mentioned that Kilikep could have come through a different process, but I'm just thinking that Nedbank was conducting this bidding process. I mean, surely there could have been no other way than coming through the Nedbank process?
I think I deal with it at some point.
Okay.
Yes, I'll come to that.
At some point on how Kilikep came to be where they were?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
8.5, as soon as we had agreed to join forces, Mr. Mulawitse and I then approached Dr. Machila to inform him of our intention to join forces and to inquire whether our proposal would be acceptable to the PIC.
Was that on the same day? Remember Dr. Machila left the two of you in
after our meeting, yes, yeah.
Yes,
It was before we left the PIC offices. So it couldn't have been after a separate meeting in our offices. Dr. Machila indicated to us that our proposal to join forces would only be acceptable if the seller and the corporate advisors considered the joint bidding and proposal to be acceptable. So, and he left us there. 9, Kisako Kilimanjaro Consortium.
Just a question here. Just given the two versions of how you met and when, whether it was at the PIC or somewhere else, can you attribute that to memory or there could be other issues there?
No, my memory is correct. I remember most of the meetings where I have them, and so I have good memory. I do trust my judgment that meeting was at PIC. The reason is because we are the beggars. We go to where the funds are, and the meeting has to be there.
Yes, sure. But if Kilikep are giving a different version, do you think it could just be memory issues, or there could be other things why they're putting that kind of a version?
I cannot comment whether it's memory, just a plain forgetfulness, or it's other motives. So I think Mr. Mlawitz can respond.
Yeah, but you cannot come up with some motive from your point of view why they would say that.
I don't know. I cannot comment on that. I think the issue, I still don't understand why Mr. Mlawitz would say Sakumnoto was imposed. I'm still trying to find the motive for that, why he would say that. So it's very difficult to answer on his behalf. Only he can explain why he said that.
The corporate advisors?
Nedbank.
Okay, so that's the reference to Nedbank.
Yes. Okay. On or about 30 July 2015, we, Kilikep and Sakumnoto, jointly sent a notification to corporate advisors that two entities had the intention to merge their bidding and proposal in relation to Tsalulo shares in Tosaka. The notification is attached here too as marked SM6.
Would it be correct to infer from what you've just stated that on 30 July 2015 there was no formal agreement signed between the two of you? There was just
As
the
of-
intention.
There was intention, yes, yeah, definitely. So this is an intention which we sent to Nedbank. So we needed to get their permission. Nedbank was going to consult the sellers and check if, in accordance with their processing, bidding processes, if that was acceptable. You know, that suddenly two bidders would match. They could have come up with an answer which says, no, you proceed on your own, or it's fine, you can match. So they responded and said they would not have any objection. On the same day, 30 July 2015, this is 9.2, corporate advisors confirmed receipt of our email and advised us that they have circulated it to the shareholders of Tosaka to get their consent. On 17 August 2015, we submitted our joint binding offer with Kilicap to corporate advisors. And on
Sorry, so between that period of 30th of July and 17th of August, the corporate advisors would have informed you that it was okay that that you could submit as a joint initiative?
Yes, they confirmed that, and they said we can submit now a final binding offer jointly with the proposed valuation for the purchase price. On 18 August 2015, we received a letter from corporate advisors confirming the selection of Kilimanjaro Sakumnoto as the preferred bidder for the project Atlas process. This letter, jointly addressed to Mr. Mlaudzi and myself, is attached in Annexure SM7. And the letter drew our attention to the indicative key milestones, which were as follows. 18 August, notification of preferred bidder of the outcome of the binding offers submitted, negotiations of execution of subscriptions, purchase and sale agreement, 31st August, negotiation and execution of funding agreements by 1st September, obtain approval from Total South Africa Limited to the proposed transaction, 18 September, receipt of Competition Commission approval, 30 November 2015, and final close for December 2015. These were the timelines given to us by corporate advisors and the sellers. Pursuant to the receipt of the letter from the corporate advisors confirming that Kilimanjaro Sakumnoto was selected as preferred bidder, the PIC then sent a letter to the corporate advisors confirming that should the consortium be selected, the PIC confirms its intention to fund the consortium subject to PIC standard terms and conditions and the fulfillment of conditions precedent. A copy of the said letter is also annexed to marked SM8.
If I could ask you, in terms of the deal itself, the PIC, if I recall, recommended to or proposed to Kilimanjaro that they use BNP. Who were your advisors in the transaction?
So we, when we started the transaction, we worked with Goldman Sachs, which were our transaction advisors in Northam. And in the middle of the total transaction, one of the directors of Goldman Sachs in Africa left Goldman Sachs and started his practice, Mr. Nana Sao of Sao Capital. So we, because we had worked with him at Goldman Sachs, so we went to him to say, can you support with us, because we started this transaction with you. You understand the transaction better. So we worked with him. He started his Sao Capital.
It was not, it was your own choice? There was no recommendation by the PIC that you should use Sao?
No, it was our own choice. As I said, that we had a relationship where they advised us, Goldman Sachs advised us on the Northam transaction, and Mr. Nana Sao was part of that. So when he left Goldman Sachs, he started his own business, and we decided to follow him because we were comfortable with him and happy with his advice.
A question there is that didn't Goldman Sachs charge you for the work that they had done before the move to Sao Capital?
No, because at the, He moved just after we started, so there was not yet a lot of work that he did under Goldman Sachs. So when he moved, we just decided to follow him. You know, you normally follow the partner that you know, even in law firms and accounting firms.
So you basically cancelled the mandate that you had with Goldman Sachs?
Yes, yeah.
Did you have a mandate with Goldman Sachs and you just say, as a client, I'm cancelling this? Is that what happened?
I think we did. I can't recall, but as I said, during that time, it was the beginning of the transaction. So, and when he informed us that I'll be leaving Goldman Sachs to start my own outfit and work with other black professionals, we decided to go and support him.
Okay.
And there was no problem of a restraint that you know of?
No, we don't know if there was any restraint. We don't believe he had any restraint. At least he did not disclose that to us. 9.6, in light of the above, it is therefore wholly untrue that Kilikep was forced by PIC and or by Dr. Machila to merge with Sakumnoto. This was a mutual business decision by myself and Mr. Mulaudzi in order to increase the chances of both our entities of succeeding in the bid for the Tosaka shares. It was a joint business decision that we took at the time without external influence. Okay. So I've dealt with the issue of exclusivity of the transaction reserved. So, in the responses to the questions that you've asked, and submitted that SM4 to clarify that. And number 11, due diligence on Sakumnoto. In Mr. Mlaudzi's statement to the PIC Commission on 27th March 2019, in paragraph 22, it was alleged that PIC did not conduct a due diligence on Sakumnoto, and as was done on Kilikep.
Can I just perhaps interrupt you there? As I recall correctly, and I had a look again at Mr. Malaudzi's statement, is his evidence there was at the time that he inquired from Dr. Machila as to whether Sakumnoto had been through the same due diligence process as Kilikep. A response was not forthcoming in this regard, and I think his evidence was till that day when he testified the response was not forthcoming. So he asked,
okay,
and it was not answered.
Yes.
I must say I do not recall him testifying that no due diligence was done on your application.
He may not have, our understanding, he may not have said so directly, but indirectly may have imputed that they doubt if due diligence was done, creating that impression of favoritism. And so we deal with that because it was raised. So we thought it appropriate to respond to that statement, Commissioner.
Did you have a look at his statement before you drew up yours?
Yes, we did look at his statement. He did say he was not sure, and the response, I confirm what advocate said on that.
Well, exactly, that's been worrying me because I do not recall him saying that there was none. I remember
Yes.
he was asked by one of us and he said, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think he might have said we must check with you or the PIC, if I can recall.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he didn't really answer and say there was no due diligence. I think
Okay.
he said check with the Sakumnoto or check with the PIC, as
Thank
far
you.
as I can recall. I think I asked that question actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
can't
for the
recall, but
clarification.
yeah, okay.
Thank you for the clarification. We thought we should respond to it because to other people, it may create an impression that there was no due diligence done on Sakumnoto, if it's left hanging like that.
Can I just, before you also proceed, my colleague just drew my attention to the fact that Mr. Tsepu Rapudi, who testified before the Commission, stated in his evidence that Sakumnoto had entered into a risk-based mandate with Sao Capital. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Libber, we find it difficult to hear you.
Apologize, I'll repeat it. Is this better, Mr. Commissioner? Mr. Tsepu Rapudi testified that Sakumoto had entered into a risk-based mandate with SAR Capital. You confirm that?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Okay. I just need to, through you, Chair, indicate that I'd indicated to advocate that I've got international engagements. I have to travel at 4. I have to, my flight is at 4, and I have to be at the airport at 2.
Chair,
so I'll try and move fast.
I was going to ask the Commission, that is indeed correct. Mr. Seleke informed me before the hearing that he has to catch an international flight and that we would do our level best. He must be at the airport at the latest by 2, so we can perhaps have a very brief lunch break, but to finish him so that he can be able to leave here at 1:30.
Sure. Maybe I can deal with all the issues, then deal with the questions later.
I think that's what we intend doing here, to let you go through your statement, and then if there's time left, to ask whatever questions we have.
Thank you very much.
Let's see how it goes, because my colleague reckons there are matters that she would like to raise with due diligence section.
Yes. 11.2, 11.3, as I have previously indicated, at the time of negotiations on the Tosaka transaction, Sakumoto was already a PIC client through the previous transaction on ETI, which took place around 2010-2011. An extensive due diligence with site visits, meeting with Sakumoto directors and management had already been done on Sakumoto. Only a confirmatory due diligence was conducted in relation to Tosaka transaction with the request to updates on FICA documents, BE verification, and shareholder information, director information. Unlike Kilicap, Sakumoto was not at this time the new client to PIC, so that he files and files on Sakumoto, and the information was the same when they did the confirmatory due diligence. 11.4, as I've indicated above, our major transaction with PIC included a lengthy process of due diligence, which took not less than a year. It is for this reason that it cannot be said that Sakumoto has never undergone, or I must correct that, that he was not, Mr. Mlauzi was not sure if that was done.
That's what's written in your statement.
Yes.
You can read what's in there.
12.
Hang on. Before you move so quickly, the question around this, I'm sorry, the question around this is in actual fact that in relation to the Tosaka deal, there was not a proper due diligence on the part of the PIC. It was, as you've stated here, a confirmatory due diligence because of previous things. But Tosaka is a different entity, and the question for me looking at this is whether the PIC looked at the cumulative effect of its exposure to yourselves by looking at this due diligence and see whether in actual fact the risk to the PIC is increased by it or not, and therefore the requirement for a due diligence is not only on the transaction but the cumulative impact. And what you're confirming here is that a confirmatory due diligence was done with specific items that you mentioned, not the question of a due diligence that would be warranted or should be warranted for a transaction of this size in relation to its exposure to you.
Through you, Commissioner, just to respond to the question, as I said earlier on, the due diligence was in 2 phases. Due diligence on the total asset, on Tosaka. We all went through the virtual data room, and PIC did its own due diligence. All the bidders went through that, and because we all had to assess risk. And then after that, PIC did a due diligence on us, confirmatory. They had already done an extensive due diligence to who is this client.
They had
And
done
of course,
due diligence on you previous to this transaction,
correct.
not in relation to this transaction.
Yeah, in this transaction, what they did, which is to check, they always do a due diligence to check their risk profile and the maximum exposure on each client. They do that. And I believe they did that, because they have a limit in which they can fund one customer or one client.
No, one transaction, not one customer, one transaction. The delegations of authority are per transaction, not per client.
Well, that's for PIC to answer in terms of that.
I understand
yes,
that, but that's why I want clarity on what this due diligence was. Because did they present you with a risk assessment of what the exposure to you was?
Yeah, it was a due diligence to check the exposure on us as a client. So, and
in relation to this, including the
yes.
Tosaka transaction?
Yes.
Can we get a copy of that, please?
I remember us having discussion around the exposure. And
yeah,
they always raise that.
That's fine. I just want to see the due diligence that includes the risk exposure to Sakamoto as a whole with the Tosaka transaction included.
We would not be privy to
no,
it
I'm
ourselves.
Asking the Advocate Libet to
yes.
produce
it's noted.
Okay.
It's noted.
Thanks.
Can I just try to see if I understand this? When the PIC does a DD, a due diligence, is that it would look to do it on the Tosaka as an SPV, isn't it? But Tosaka has got shareholders like you and Kilikep, so they would look at that, but the bulk of the DD and the scoping report and the appraisal report would be speaking about the transaction, and the shareholders will come in along the way in that documentation. Is that correct? And would that qualify as a DD?
Yes, they would have a report on the asset if it meets their expected returns, and then they would have a report on the applicant. And so the due diligence on their side, I would expect that it will have those two components. That's our understanding. The asset, and in actual fact, they never go, in my understanding, to look at the applicant until they've done the analysis on the asset. So if it's fundable, if it can give them the returns that they expect. So they look at the applicant after they've satisfied themselves that is an investment worth looking at.
Can one say then that the main part of the DD that the PIC does is on the consortium, on the SPV and the asset?
Correct.
They don't really go and say, okay, let's look at Sakumnoto, what's your balance sheet and what is your income statement and everything? Do they do that?
They do look into the consortium, or the applicant. They ask that information from the applicant.
Did they do that with this transaction?
Yes, they did. I remember, if I recall, I think they did.
Okay, all right.
I just want you to check on that because
I'll check here.
I think you should check because, and I just want to be sure about the process here because you are, in your statement, you say only a confirmatory due diligence was conducted in relation to the Tosaka transaction, with a request for an update on FICA documents, BE verification, shareholder information, etc., because of the assumption that they had done that detail before.
Yes.
And that's all I'm asking is that it's a confirmatory, according to your statement, that due diligence is a confirmatory due diligence. It did not go back into a due diligence of what would the risk exposure be in total. So it's a slightly different question. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just trying to clarify that this was the approach taken to the due diligence by the PIC that you were subject to at that, which would be different from the Kilimanjaro one because that is a new entity that they were doing, right? So there would be a different approach.
Correct.
Yeah?
Correct. Number 12, Tosaka transaction fees in paragraph 31 of Mr. Mlaudzi statement to the Commission. It is contended that the transaction fees amounted to 100 million and that these fees were as a direct consequence of the merger between Kilikep and Sakumnoto. I said in my statement I wish to categorically deny that, but I wish to correct that because yes, it was a direct, it was as a result of the fact that the two consortium started bidding separately and then merged. In my experience, transaction fees are subjective.
Sorry, just for clarity, are you saying you wish to categorically deny this?
No, I wish to delete that.
You're changing that?
Yes.
And what are you changing it to?
That the fees amounted to...
The fees are correct?
Are correct, because the measure, individually we would have had fees of 50 million, but because of the measure and our contractual obligations, the fees increased. In my experience, transaction fees are subjective because various banks and various institutions charge different transaction fees. Therefore, it is not always easy to determine whether the transaction fees in a matter are abnormal or excessive. To my knowledge, these fees were negotiated solely by Mr. Mlaudzi. And by virtue of having established the Kisako consortium, we were comfortable with Mr. Mlaudzi negotiating the transaction fees by himself, as we are trusted that he will do his best to ensure that we get the fees as required. Sakumnoto confirms that each consortium had engaged a separate team of advisors to which we were obligated to pay the fees. Sakumnoto was, as a result, paid half of the amount, 50 million, as its share of the transaction fees. It is important for me to express to the Commission that Sakumnoto has never used the transaction fees for any unlawful or legal motive, as a matter of fact. In the Zambezi platinum transaction, Sakumnoto bore the cost of the transaction fees. This ought to illustrate our growth as a company and also the recognition that we ought to take some responsibility and share the risk as business people. If our intention was to use transaction fees for wrong purposes or fraudulent purposes, we would have consistently requested this from PIC. In addition, the Commission should be made aware that the transaction costs paid on the Tosaka transaction were not a donation, but a loan which was included with the capital amount received from the PIC. And the transaction costs were to be settled first before the capital amount. These costs have now been fully settled in our understanding. Sakumnoto's interaction with Dr. Machila, whilst I was serving as the CEO of the Association of SADC Chambers of Commerce and Industry.
Sorry, just a quick one there. When you say Mr. Mlaudzi negotiated the fees, didn't you negotiate fees with Sao Capital when you began? And
no.
Didn't you have a mandate?
I'm saying,
yeah.
To clarify, is he negotiated the transaction fee with PIC. That's what the reference is to that.
The 100 million rand.
Yes.
Oh,
the 100 million rand.
Yeah, but the fee with Sao Capital was negotiated by you.
It's by ourselves, yeah.
Okay.
Like with Mr. Mlaudzi,
Yeah.
clients negotiate with their own people.
Okay.
So here we're referring to PIC. That it's Mr. Mlaudzi who came to PIC to negotiate transaction fees for the consortium.
And what were the fees of Sao? What were the transaction fees? What was the arrangement that the ultimate
I can't
amount you
remember
agreed?
if I sent the document. I'll re-forward it to Advocate Lab.
Yeah, we just
for
need
all
the
the
total
total
of
costs.
what the transaction fee for Sao was.
I can't remember offhand, but I'll forward the information to the Advocate.
And then just a quick one again is that, so can we then assume that the PIC couldn't actually say yes or no to the 100 million rand fee because it was part of the loan that you were going to repay? They couldn't really say yes or no to it in many ways, or could they? Mainly because it was part of the loan and you were going to repay it anyway. Yeah,
necessarily, this is why I say, and we have already repaid it. So, and it was capitalized, and it's a liability. It was a liability on our part. So it was not a donation. So, but they can answer from their side if that's a normal.
So you are saying
trend.
the PIC couldn't say, no, we can pay only 70 million, not 100 million? In terms
Because
of
it's a loan, you negotiate a loan.
Yeah.
And you negotiate payment terms.
Yes.
And I think this is what happened here, and they've been paid.
Okay.
Sakunoto interaction with Dr. Machila. Whilst I was serving as the CEO of the Association of SADC Chambers of Commerce and Industry, ASCI, and later president of the Pan-African Chambers of Commerce and Industry, PASI, I had an opportunity to travel many countries in the continent. It was during this time that I met Mr. Javier Jondo, a Togolese national and a businessman who was the founding chairman of EcoBank. He later introduced me to members of the EcoBank board when they were looking to identify and appoint directors from the SADC region. I was appointed to the board of EcoBank Transnational Incorporated, ETI, on 5th June 2009, 3 years before we came to PIC to request for funding, 2 to 3 years. It was a few months later, after this, that EcoBank decided to look for black investors, African investors from South Africa and SADC region, and requested me to assist in this regard. In 2010, I, together with my colleagues at Sakunoto, established a broad-based consortium called Mpilo Financial Services and started looking for funds for the acquisition of 20% equity in EcoBank. I did not know anyone at PIC, and I discussed the opportunity and my need for funds for the acquisition with Mr. Mike Clark at a Global Business Roundtable meeting, who then introduced me to Mr. Martin Couscous, who was the CEO of the South African Bureau of Standards and the former GEPF chairperson at the time. Mr. Couscous told me he was a non-executive chair and referred me to Mr. John Oliphant, the Chief Investment Officer. Mr. Oliphant told me that the PIC manages GEPF assets and that they don't have a mandate to invest in Africa. He, however, referred me to Dr. Machila, who was Chief Investment Officer of the PIC at the time, who explained to me how PIC operated and confirmed that at the time PIC did not have a mandate to invest in Africa. It was after a year that I read in the newspapers that PIC has been allocated around 5% by GPF to invest in Africa. I then went to PIC to request funding for the EcoBank transaction. And in all my subsequent interaction with Dr. Machila and the PIC were purely professional.
Do you serve on any boards with Dr. Machila?
I served only on one board, the EcoBank board. I joined EcoBank in 2009. He joined EcoBank, I think, in 2013, after PIC invested in EcoBank. I think he was the appointed director for PIC. But I was already in that board for 3 years. Conclusion.
Just before you go there, in 13.3 you state that I went back to the PIC to request funding. Did you get the funding?
Yes, I think I dealt with the EcoBank transaction when we started. I didn't want to repeat here.
This
was a different. No, it's the same transaction that I started with, the ETI, the EcoBank transaction. We dealt with it extensively when we started as the first transaction.
Just to check something quickly there, what has happened to the share price of the EcoBank, and are you still a board member there?
No. I served for 5 years, and they rotate directors after 5 years.
Do you know where the share price is? Is the PIC still there, as an investor?
When PIC kicked that out, we lost interest, so we're no longer following.
Oh,
what's going
okay.
on.
All right. Okay.
They took our shares, and we lost interest.
We can check that, yeah.
No, just causing pain to yourself.
All right.
For the record, Mr. Commissioner, the PIC is still a shareholder in the EcoBank.
And NetBank probably still there, I guess.
Yes, NetBank
Correct.
is still there.
Yeah, okay.
Conclusion, I'm committed to assisting the PIC Commission where necessary to provide any information that is required. It takes years to build a career, a business, and a good name. One would not trade honesty, integrity, and good reputation for a short-lived gain. If you look into our profile, you will recognize that one invested a lot in building a solid foundation for one's career and business. I've served in many boards and have led Office of Trust both in private sector and public sector and business organizations. I have valued this and never taken for granted the trust that the people have bestowed on me. As earlier indicated, that I served in many public interest organizations. I am currently the convener of the Global Business Roundtable and the chairman of the Global Fund for Jesus. The global organizations that started here in South Africa and have spread across the globe to be in 82 countries in a period of 9 years. When the initial allegations were made...
Sorry, can you just explain what the Global Business Roundtable is?
It's a network organization of business people and professionals around the world.
Does it collect funds?
No, we don't collect funds.
So there's no donations collected for the work that you do through the Global Business Roundtable and the Global Fund for Jesus. Is there a relationship between the two?
Yes, the other one is a sister organization. The Global Business Roundtable is a network organization. It assists its members to grow in business, corporates, SMEs, professionals. So it's merely a massive networking platform for people to exchange information, ideas, but do business for their own sake. It benefits members. And it does not collect funds. There's no membership fees. But in each branch, people sponsor those meetings or donate for those meetings or offer venues as facilities to sponsor the work of. It's a non-profit making organization. Similarly, the Global Fund for Jesus is focused on the poor. Its plan, of course, is to raise funds to support the poor, the orphans, the widows, the charities, various charities, shelters, orphanages, but also to build infrastructure that would need to support those people. So in the past 9 years, we've been investing in building the platform, the infrastructure of ensuring that we make the two organizations known all over the world and spread across the globe. So that has been the focal point, so that when we finish what we call the foundation years, then we can start benefiting members and the poor aggressively across the globe, because people would now have knowledge of what these two organizations do.
Has there ever been a donation, a CSI, or any contribution to the Global Fund for Jesus by the PIC?
No. .3, as earlier indicated, these two organizations have grown to be in 82 countries across the globe. When the initial allegations were made by General Bantu Olomisa in Parliament and published in many newspapers such as City Press, Business Day, Sunday Times, those allegations shook our organizations to the core. Questions came from many countries such as the USA, UK, Spain, West Africa, East Africa, and other countries about the statement and allegations made against me and Sakumnoto. General Bantu Olomisa had referred to the Kilimanjaro Sakumnoto Consortium as ANC cronies. Many of our leaders around the world were so upset, and they recommended that we institute defamation lawsuits against the perpetrators of those unfounded allegations. It was a lot of work to explain and rebuild confidence. I must say that the reason why General Olomisa made this allegation, it was because of one of the shareholders and or directors of Kilikep, who was at the time the chairman of the Jacob Zuma Education Trust. So, of course it affected us because we had merged the two consortium. So, and people believed that we were But in this transaction, when we did it, we never met that person. He was not part of the negotiations, at least with our meetings. So, but this is the allegation that was made, and I just wish to clarify that as a result, we all suffered reputational damage. Our company, Sakunoto Group, established...
Who's this person that you're talking about?
The person is Mr. Sizwe Shezi. I think Mr. Mlawitz mentioned him when you asked him a question about the directors of Kilicap. So he's one of the directors and shareholders.
And would you say that that is when your troubles really started, you know?
Yes, they started, because before then, our company was never in the media for anything.
Is it?
This is the first partnership that has really put a strain on us.
And do you think the media sort of pursued you because of the link with the Mr. Shezi and the JZ Trust and all that?
The only politically exposed person in the Kilicap is only in the Kilicap transaction, and that person was Mr. Shezi because of that high-profile office that he held. That's the only person, to our knowledge, who was sort of can be classified as politically exposed.
And your consortium, your Sakumnoto, was never linked to any politicians or?
We have no politically exposed person. We ensured that we do not have any politician. And or any person related to them. So we've always maintained that we will not.
That's interesting. So you were swept along with the Kilicap stroke Shezi, Mr. Shezi's links and all that.
Yeah,
is that
I think
what
because
you're
of the link. So when they say ANC cronies, political connected people, because we had joined the consortiums, I think that's how our name got in there.
And if you know, please tell me, so are you saying that the PIC funding you, there was no link between that area where there was this political network?
No, not from our side as Sakumnoto.
But broadly as Kisako, you don't think there could have been something along those lines?
I do not think so, because I may not know, but I do not think so, because in all our negotiations with PIC, from the merger of Sakunoto and Kilicap, we never saw Mr. Shezi. So we only dealt with the other directors. So, and he was never in any meetings, were never introduced, and it was just Mr. Mlawutsi, Dr. Kinesh Petha, and Obayat Joseph. It was those directors that were fully involved. So we never met him as Sakunoto.
Okay, thank you.
At the time, we subsequently met later, but before the transaction, we never met him. So we met him probably a year later, long after the transaction was done.
If I can remember the media reports, that was the big deal about these transactions, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
That link.
That there's, we are ANC cronies because they're politically exposed people.
Yes, okay.
I think that may have been the cause. Our company, Sakunoto Group, established 19 years ago, was also founded on hard work, dedication, honesty, integrity, and good governance. We are guided by our faith, which is grounded on high moral values, ethics, integrity, and strong principles. We have paid a huge price for taking this route and refuse to take shortcuts. I must emphasize, we've lost lots of deals. We've been shut out because of this route. We have never been involved in any form of corruption, bribery, maladministration, or anything that would be illegal or unlawful. We were shocked when by General Olomisa's allegations. I even confronted him on the matter. And as for Mr. Mlawutsi's statement to the Commission a few weeks ago, we remain shocked and puzzled by his bold statements that our company was imposed on Kilimanjaro Capital by the PIC. We believe we had our own track record, good reputation, and we did not need to be imposed on any party, let alone an entity that was a startup at the time. In my statement, I've tried to demonstrate how impossible this would have been, considering the process that we all went through to be selected as preferred bidders. By saying Dr. Machila imposed Sakumnoto on Kilimanjaro capital, Mr. Mlaudzi was implying that there may be a corrupt relationship between Sakumnoto and Dr. Machila or the PIC. We challenge him to bring evidence to this effect, if he has, and not make unfounded and defamatory allegations. The question we ask ourselves is, why would Mr. Mlaudzi make those allegations, and why would he lie under oath? Because really it was a lie. One of our legal principles is that he who alleges must prove. We would like to challenge Mr. Mlaudzi, General Olomisa, and various media houses to use this commission of inquiry to bring evidence to substantiate the allegations. We believe the commission is a better place to assess every evidence presented to it and pronounce on the validity of the allegations. I thank you, Chair.
Mr. Commissioner, this is the evidence, and there's, I don't want to curtail any proceedings, but I've promised the witness that we should be finished by 1 o'clock, but if we go 3 or 4 minutes later, I suppose it would not be a problem. You'll still make it?
Yeah. So.
Just one question. Just to follow up on, as you say, Kilimanjaro stroke, Mr. Shezi, you know, wouldn't you have done a DD on Kilimanjaro to check if they are politically exposed people with the attendant reputational risk that you have suffered, that the PIC has suffered? You know, don't you think there was that element of a PEP within that area? And wouldn't it have worked better for you to have done that risk assessment? And you wouldn't be in this position.
On the benefit of the hindsight, through you, Commissioner, on the benefit of the hindsight, we should have done that. So we did the transaction in good faith. There were time pressures, I must emphasize, that were set up by the transaction advisors and the sellers. So, and we just trusted each other, and we did the transaction on handshake. But there was no need for us to suspect, as I said, because Mr. Shezi was not part of those negotiations, was not in any of those meetings. We only met him a year or so later. So there was nothing really that rang to us that, but after this experience, we know that the third due diligence that we need to do is ourselves. If we partner with other people, we definitely need to check who we're partnering with to manage our own risk, because this has really shaken not only our company, Sakumnoto Group, but it has shaken even the organizations that I serve in. And because if my reputation is challenged, those organizations get affected. If you're a leader, generally it cascades down. So, and that advice we take, and I think we will from now on ensure we do due diligence before we partner with any entity.
And I'm not talking about whether Mr. Shezi was wrong or right. I'm just saying, you know, looking at the situation. Okay.
No, we agree.
I just want to be clear, so I'm not judging him or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you.
Okay. Thanks, I'm done.
Thank you.
Can I just make sure that I understand your testimony correctly? You say after you had a meeting with Dr. Machila on the day that you met Mr. Mlaudzi for the first time, if it was the first time.
It was the first time.
First time.
Yes.
You had your meeting, you part, because he says I'm going to have another meeting with another applicant.
Yes.
He goes there, you follow him down the passage.
Yes.
And you're saying that's through pure
curiosity of knowing who that, yes.
He gets in, he carries on with his meeting, and you walk into the meeting as well.
The way he had put him was that was going to be a short meeting, just to inform him what he told me, because our meeting did not take 5 minutes. It was very brief. And he just told me the PIC stance remain. They will not entertain any bidder. They will only engage exclusively the preferred bidder, in other words, the winner, because they had received many applicants. It was not only us or Kilikep that had applied. There were many applicants that had applied. So I think to protect their own integrity, they thought it's better to wait for the bidding process to finish so that they deal with the preferred bidder.
But you walk into their meeting. It wasn't your meeting. You weren't invited.
I wasn't invited. I just followed out of curiosity because, of course, there was a curiosity of wanting to know this bidder, and secondly, if he is going to get the same feedback as I did, and he got the same feedback as I did, that no bidder would be funded.
Yes. You see, I don't understand how you walk into a meeting. You get to the door and you see he's having a meeting with somebody else. Why didn't you walk away?
At the time, I didn't think that way. As I said, Commissioner, that he had explained to me that he was meeting another person who's applied, and that the response he would give to that person is the same as me. So I didn't see anything odd at the time because the person was going to get the very same feedback as I got. So, and in hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. I should have called this partner later, this Mr. Mlaudzi later outside of the PIC environment. I agree that with the benefit of the hindsight, maybe that's what I should have done.
Did I understand your evidence correctly that you followed Dr. Dan, or did you walk with him to this other room?
I followed him when he went to his meeting to meet Mr. Mlaudzi.
Curious to see this other person.
Yeah, curious to see our competitor.
You then walk in and he leaves and leaves the two of you behind.
No, when we walked in, he did say,
Well, he
did introduce to say, here's Mr. Mlaudzi, another applicant, and the same response I gave to you as I gave to other people who applied is that PIC will not fund anyone except if they are preferred bidders. And then he left.
And then he leaves the two of you there.
Yes, he left us there. And the talk, how we were going to work together if we wanted to, was between us. And we could have really said no. We're going to stretch it long haul. But we looked at the time frames. We looked at the issue that both of us were desperate to do the deal. We wanted to be successful winners, and both of us were desperate to get funding. So as business people, we looked at this and said the time is against us. So we can pursue deals separately. There's only going to be one winner.
But did Dr. Dan Machila say to you or suggest to you that it would be better for two applicants to merge?
At least not to me.
Say that again?
At least he didn't say that to me.
So why did you go and make a suggestion to Mr. Mlaudzi that you should merge?
No, we talked about it after Dr. Dan left. And remember, we had a tight deadline to submit our binding offer.
Yes, but that's got...
And there were two obstacles.
But that's got nothing to do with the merger. That's got nothing to do with the suggestion to merge. That's where my difficulty is. I want to know, why did you suggest a merger with Mr. Mlaudzi if Dr. Dan didn't indicate to anyone that it would be better if the two were to merge, or if two applicants were to merge?
I suggested it for two reasons, Commissioner. One, because as a business, and with the time frames that we had, I thought it appropriate to say we can fast track the process because these two processes depended on the final bidder, and the funding depended on who the final bidder was. So as a businessman, when you say let's put our forces together, we've done that in many transactions. This is not the first one, and both benefit rather than keep on fighting each other and there's one who loses and there's one who wins. That's correct. And so we were very sensitive to the fact that there was going to be one winner. And actually both of us were sensitive to that fact, that only one
and you were
entity.
sure, but you were sure about your application, that you've done your work on your side. That's how I understand your statement.
Yes, we were sure in terms of our application that we had sound application, track record, etc. But you can never be sure if you don't know the strength of other bidders, even though you're sure of your own application, but you may be meeting other formidable competitors out there.
All right. Mr. Mseleku, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And thank you. I think you asked to come to testify, isn't it?
Yes, I did ask.
You indicated. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks
for doing it. You've thrown more light in the whole issue. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
But if it so happens that we would like something cleared that we haven't cleared today, we might come back to you and say, please come again.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Is that suitable time for the lunch adjournment?
And Mr. Mseleku is excused with your legal...
Thank you.
I don't know whether to say assistant or legal representative. And we shall take the luncheon adjournment and resume at 2.
Thank you very much.